You know what they say about absolute power corrupting absolutely. Well, nobody bothered telling that to Admiral Vrex Thornblade of the Galactic Confederation, mostly because anyone who tried ended up as space dust. For 300 years, Thornblade and his merry band of genocidal psychopaths had been the galaxy's favorite nightmare, crushing civilizations like a toddler stepping on ants. Picture this guy, if you will. 8 feet tall, covered in what looked like angry purple scales, with 6 arms that each ended in claws sharp enough to open cans and enemies with equal efficiency. His throne room aboard the dreadnought Inevitable Suffering, he was decorated with the skulls of 1,000 species. Real subtle interior design choices there, Vrex. Status report. Thornblade growled, his voice sounding like gravel being processed through a garbage disposal. His lieutenant, a nervous insectoid creature named Commander Zix, scurried forward with a data pad clutched in his trembling claws. My lord, we have successfully annexed the Rigel system. The inhabitants offered minimal resistance before accepting our generous offer of complete subjugation. Generous, Thornblade repeated, savoring the word like fine wine. I do so enjoy our generosity. What's next on our conquest schedule? Zix consulted his pad, mandibles clicking nervously. Well, sir, there's still that small matter of the Sol system. Sector designation Terra 3. The inhabitants call their planet Earth. Thornblade's 6 eyes rolled in perfect synchronization, a feat that had taken him years to master and never failed to intimidate subordinates. Earth. That backwater mud ball with the bipedal primates who just discovered faster than light travel. Zix, we have been ruling this galaxy since before they invented the wheel. Why are we even discussing this? Sir, protocol dictates that all inhabited systems must be brought under Confederation control, even the particularly primitive ones. The Admiral stood, his massive frame casting shadows across the bridge. You know what, Commander? You're absolutely right. We can't have any loose ends, can we? These humans might develop delusions of grandeur. They might start thinking they're important. Aye. He gestured to his tactical display, where Earth appeared as a tiny blue dot, utterly insignificant among the thousands of red markers indicating Confederation territory. Look at them. Zix. They haven't even colonized their own solar system properly. They're probably still fighting each other over who gets to exploit which patch of dirt. Intelligence reports confirm ongoing conflicts, sir, something called geopolitics. They seem particularly concerned about borders and resources. Thornblade laughed, a sound like grinding metal. Borders. Resources. Oh, that's precious. Wait until they meet us. We'll show them what a real border looks like. The kind that extends from the edge of their atmosphere to the cold vacuum of space. The bridge crew, a collection of species that had learned long ago to appreciate their commander's sense of humor, or else chuckled appropriately. Nothing quite like forced laughter to maintain morale. Sir, Zix ventured, perhaps we should send a small scouting force first. Standard procedure for unknown variables? Unknown variables. Thornblade's scales shifted from purple to a more aggressive shade of crimson. Commander, these creatures just figured out how to leave their own planet. My personal shuttle has more firepower than their entire military. We could conquer them with a single frigate and a stern warning. He paused, stroking one of his chins thoughtfully. Actually, you know what? Let's make this interesting. I'm bored, Zix. 3 centuries of effortless conquest tends to make one appreciate the finer points of military strategy. Let's give these humans the full treatment. Deploy the 7th Fleet. The entire 7th Fleet, sir. That's 50 dreadnoughts, 200 cruisers, and enough firepower to crack a moon. Exactly. Overwhelming force. Shock and awe. They'll surrender before we even fire a shot. It'll be over in an hour, maybe 2 if they're particularly stubborn about accepting their new reality. Thornblade settled back into his throne, already imagining the glory. Besides, it's been too long since we've had a proper victory parade. The troops need entertainment, and nothing entertains quite like watching a species realize they're about to become extinct. Commander Zix made a note on his pad. Shall I prepare the standard surrender terms, sir? Oh, absolutely. Complete capitulation, tribute payments, and the usual selection of their finest specimens for the gladiatorial arenas. Though honestly, Zix, I doubt these humans will provide much sport. They'll probably just roll over and beg for mercy. The Admiral gazed out at the stars, each one representing systems under his control. Soon there would be one more. A tiny, insignificant addition to his empire, but completion had its own satisfaction. You know what the best part is, Commander? They'll never see us coming. Their primitive sensors can't detect our ships until we're practically in orbit. By the time they realize what's happening, it'll already be over. If Admiral Vrex Thornblade had possessed even a shred of cosmic awareness, he might have noticed the universe holding its breath at that moment. He might have sensed the approaching cosmic joke of which he was about to become the punchline. But megalomaniacs rarely possess that kind of self-awareness. Instead, he simply smiled, showing rows of razor-sharp teeth, and began planning humanity's funeral. Meanwhile, on the supposedly doomed planet Earth, General Marcus Boulder was having what he optimistically called a strategic planning session. Others might have called it a panic attack with PowerPoint slides, but Boulder preferred his version. Gentlemen, ladies and assorted military personnel, he announced to the packed briefing room at NORAD, we are absolutely, completely, 100% screwed. Boulder was the kind of man who looked like he'd been carved from actual boulder by someone with only a vague understanding of human anatomy. Square jaw, square shoulders, square head containing what his critics generously described as square thoughts. He'd risen through the ranks primarily by being loud, confident, and wrong about most things in an authoritative manner. Sir, interrupted Colonel Peterson, perhaps we should maintain some optimism for the troops. Optimism? Boulder's voice cracked like a whip. Peterson, we're facing an alien armada that makes our entire space fleet look like a collection of paper airplanes. Our most advanced weapons are roughly equivalent to throwing rocks at a tank. The only optimism I can muster is that it'll be over quickly. In the back of the room, Dr. Luna Brightwick raised her hand. If Boulder looked like he'd been carved from stone, Brightwick looked like she'd been assembled from spare parts by a mad scientist with an excellent sense of humor. Wild grey hair, thick glasses held together with tape, and a lab coat that had seen better decades. Actually, General, I might have a solution. The room fell silent. Boulder's left eye began twitching, a sure sign he was about to make a decision he'd regret. Dr. Brightwick, with all due respect, your last solution involved trying to communicate with dolphins for national defense purposes. That was a perfectly valid research avenue, Brightwick protested. Dolphins are remarkably intelligent. Besides, this is completely different. I've been working on something I call the quantum uncertainty defense grid. The what now? Brightwick pushed her glasses up her nose, leaving a smudge that somehow made her look even more eccentric. Well, you see, I'd been studying quantum mechanics and I realized something fascinating. If you can create enough quantum uncertainty in a localized space, it becomes impossible for any targeting system to achieve a lock. Boulder stared at her. In English, Doctor. I can make us impossible to hit by making reality temporarily confused about where we actually are. That, Boulder said slowly, is either the most brilliant thing I've ever heard, or the most insane. Why not both? Before Boulder could respond, another voice piped up from the middle of the room. Excuse me, sir, but what exactly are we defending with? Last I checked, our Space Force consists of 3 aging shuttles and a bunch of satellites that can barely find their way to orbit. This came from Captain Jake Ironside, Earth's most reluctant space pilot. Ironside had joined the space program expecting a quiet career of routine cargo runs and maybe the occasional asteroid survey. Instead, he'd somehow become humanity's premier expert on interplanetary combat, primarily because he was the only pilot who'd actually fired weapons in space. Granted, he'd been shooting at space debris, but Boulder considered this close enough to combat experience. That's where you come in, Captain, Boulder said with the kind of smile that made subordinates nervous. You'll be leading our defensive fleet. Our fleet of 3 shuttles? 3 very advanced shuttles. Sir, the newest one is 15 years old and makes a concerning rattling noise during atmospheric re-entry. Boulder waved dismissively. Character building. Besides, Dr. Brightwick's quantum thingy will make you basically invincible. Right, Doctor? Well, theoretically, yes. But I should mention that I've never actually tested it. The math looks solid, though. Ironside buried his face in his hands. We're all going to die. Not with that attitude, Boulder declared. Look, here's the plan. Dr. Brightwick activates her quantum whatever it is, making our forces impossible to target. Captain Ironside leads our 3 shuttles in a daring assault that will surely inspire fear in our enemies. Meanwhile, I'll coordinate the defense from this bunker, making crucial strategic decisions. What kind of strategic decisions? Peterson asked. The important kind. Strategic ones, with strategy. Dr. Brightwick cleared her throat. General, I should mention that the quantum uncertainty defense grid has some potential side effects. Such as? Yes. Well, since it works by making reality uncertain about our location, it might also make reality uncertain about other things, like physics, or causality, or whether we actually exist. Boulder considered this for exactly 3 seconds. Acceptable risks. Anything else? There's a slight possibility that activating the grid could tear a hole in space-time. How slight? By 50-50. I'll take those odds. Captain Ironside, how long do you need to prepare our fleet for glorious battle? Ironside looked around the room desperately, hoping someone would admit this was all an elaborate joke. No such luck. Sir, defining our 3 shuttles as a fleet seems overly generous. The cargo bay on Shuttle 2 doesn't even seal properly. Perfect for rapid deployment of troops. We don't have any troops to deploy, sir. We'll worry about that later. The important thing is maintaining initiative. Doctor, how long before your quantum doodad is ready? Brightwick consulted a notebook that looked like it had been used as a coaster for several years. I'll need about 6 hours to calibrate the dimensional flux capacitors and align the probability matrices. You have 4 hours. That's not how physics works, General. Physics got us into this mess, Doctor. I'm pretty sure we can get physics to cooperate when it comes to getting us out. As the meeting broke up, Ironside found himself walking alongside Dr. Brightwick toward the exit. Doctor, can I ask you something? Of course, Captain. Do you have any idea what you're actually doing? Brightwick paused, considering the question with scientific precision. You know, Captain, I've built a career on not entirely understanding what I'm doing but doing it with tremendous confidence. It's served me well so far. That's oddly reassuring. I thought so too. Oh, and Captain, when you're out there tomorrow, try not to think too hard about whether you exist or not. The quantum uncertainty field is sensitive to observation, and philosophical doubt could cause some interesting side effects. Ironside stopped walking. What kind of side effects? The fun kind. Probably. As Earth's finest military minds scattered to prepare for humanity's first interstellar war, none of them noticed the small detail that would later prove crucial. In all their planning, panic, and pseudo-scientific theorizing, they'd forgotten to actually inform anyone else on the planet that they were about to be invaded. This oversight would turn out to be either the most disastrous or most brilliant strategic decision in human history. Possibly both. But Toad. The next morning dawned crisp and clear over Earth, which seemed almost insulting given that it was potentially humanity's last sunrise. The Galactic Confederation's 7th Fleet had dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the solar system, their sensors immediately locking onto the small blue planet that represented their latest conquest. Admiral Thornblade stood on his bridge, admiring the tactical display. 50 dreadnoughts arranged in perfect formation, their weapons charged and ready. It was, he had to admit, probably overkill, but there was something satisfying about overwhelming force, like using a sledgehammer to crack a walnut. Sir, Commander Zix reported, we're detecting some unusual energy readings from the planet's surface. Weapons? Thornblade asked hopefully. He'd been looking forward to at least a token resistance. Unknown, sir. The readings don't match any known weapon signatures in our database. Thornblade shrugged. Probably some primitive defense system. Nuclear missiles, maybe, or kinetic projectiles. Nothing that can penetrate our shields. What they were actually detecting, of course, was Dr. Brightwick's quantum uncertainty defense grid powering up in a facility outside Colorado Springs. The good doctor was running around her laboratory like a caffeinated tornado, kept throwing switches and adjusting dials with the kind of scientific precision that would have made her professors weep. Dimensional flux capacitors online, she muttered, checking items off a list written on what appeared to be a coffee-stained napkin. Probability matrices aligned. Quantum uncertainty field generator spinning up to full power. And I only have 17 minutes left instead of the 4 hours I actually needed. The machine she'd built looked exactly like what you'd expect from someone who'd designed it in 3 days using spare parts and wild optimism. Cables snaked everywhere, jury-rigged components hummed ominously, and at least 3 different warning lights were blinking in patterns that suggested imminent catastrophe. This is either going to save humanity or turn Earth inside out, she said cheerfully, throwing the final switch. Reality hiccuped. Meanwhile, in orbit, Captain Ironside was discovering that commanding Earth's fleet was about as glamorous as it sounded. Shuttle 1 was making concerning groaning noises, Shuttle 2's cargo bay door was held shut with duct tape, and Shuttle 3's pilot was a 22-year-old intern named Kevin who'd volunteered primarily because he thought it would look good on his resume. "All right, people," Ironside said over the comm system, trying to inject some confidence into his voice. "Remember, we're not trying to win this fight. We're just trying to buy time for Dr. Brightwick's miracle device to work." "Captain," Kevin's voice crackled through the radio, "are we sure this is a good idea? I mean, they have 50 warships and we have 3 shuttles that barely qualify as spacecraft." "That's the spirit, Kevin. Embrace the futility." Down in NORAD, General Boulder was watching the whole spectacle unfold on his tactical screens. The alien fleet had arranged itself in what was clearly a standard invasion formation, probably something they'd used to conquer hundreds of worlds. Against any rational enemy, it would have been devastatingly effective. Fortunately for humanity, they weren't facing a rational enemy. They were facing humans who had a long and distinguished history of winning through sheer bloody-minded stupidity. "Sir," Colonel Peterson reported, "the alien fleet is moving into attack position, ETA to Earth orbit in 30 minutes. "Perfect," Boulder said, though sweat was beading on his forehead. "Dr. Brightwick, status on the quantum what's it?" "Just activated it. General, you should start seeing effects any moment now." What happened next would be debated by physicists for generations, assuming there were any physicists left after this was over. The quantum uncertainty defense grid did exactly what Dr. Brightwick had designed it to do, which was make reality profoundly confused about where Earth's defenders actually were. The problem was, it also made reality confused about pretty much everything else. Admiral Thornblade was the first to notice something was wrong when his tactical officer reported that their target acquisition systems couldn't get a lock on the 3 human shuttles. "What do you mean, can't get a lock?" Thornblade demanded. "Sir, the computer keeps reporting that the enemy vessels are simultaneously in 17 different locations, none of which appear to actually exist." "That's impossible." "Yes, sir, but they're being impossible very consistently." Thornblade studied his display, watching 3 small blips that seemed to be occupying multiple positions at once while also not being there at all. "Are our sensors malfunctioning?" "All diagnostics show green, sir. The sensors are working perfectly. Reality, on the other hand, seems to be having some technical difficulties." This was, in fact, precisely what was happening. Dr. Brightwick's quantum uncertainty defense grid was working exactly as intended, creating a field of localized quantum uncertainty that made it impossible for the Confederation's targeting computers to figure out where anything was. The unfortunate side effect was that it was also making it impossible for anyone else to figure out where anything was, including the people inside the uncertainty field. Captain Ironside discovered this when he tried to check his position and found that his navigation computer was reporting his coordinates as yes, maybe, and the concept of location is meaningless. "Kevin, what's your status?" he called over the radio. "I'm not sure I exist, Captain. My instruments keep telling me I'm both here and not here, and also possibly in several parallel dimensions. That's the quantum field working. Just try to point your shuttle at the big scary alien ships and fire everything we've got. How do I point at them if I don't know where I am or where they are? Wing it, Kevin. When in doubt, wing it. This was approximately the moment when Admiral Thornblade realized he might have underestimated the humans. Not because they were tactically brilliant or technologically superior, but because they appeared to be completely insane. "Sir," his weapons officer reported, "the humans are firing at us." "Excellent. Return fire." "Sir, I can't target them. Every time I try to lock onto their position, the computer tells me they're not there." "Then fire where they're not." "Sir, according to our sensors, they're not everywhere." Thornblade's scales shifted to a deeper shade of red. "Are you telling me that 3 primitive shuttles have somehow made themselves untouchable?" "It appears so, sir. Also, their weapons seem to be having some unusual effects on our shields." This was true. Earth's pathetic little missiles, which should have bounced harmlessly off Confederation shields, were instead punching through like they were made of paper. Not because the missiles were particularly powerful, but because the quantum uncertainty field was making the laws of physics very flexible about what was possible. In his shuttle, Ironside watched in amazement as his ancient missiles somehow tore through the alien flagship's shields and punched holes in its hull. "Well," he said to himself, "that's not supposed to work." General Boulder, watching from his command bunker, was having similar thoughts. "Peterson, are you seeing this?" "Yes, sir." "Our forces appear to be winning." "How?" "I have absolutely no idea, sir." Dr. Brightwick, monitoring her quantum field generator, was equally baffled. "This is fascinating. The uncertainty field seems to be amplifying chaotic elements in the tactical situation. Every random factor is being magnified exponentially. What she didn't mention was that the field was also slowly tearing holes in local spacetime, but she figured one crisis at a time. Admiral Thornblade, watching his supposedly invincible fleet get picked apart by 3 shuttles and some missiles that violated several fundamental laws of physics, came to a disturbing realization. "Commander Zix," he said slowly, "I think we may have made a tactical error." "Sir?" "We assumed these humans were primitive because their technology appeared inferior. But what if they're not primitive? What if they're so advanced that their weapons only look primitive?" Zix considered this. "Sir, are you suggesting that Earth is more technologically sophisticated than the entire Galactic Confederation?" "I'd look at the evidence, Commander. They've somehow made their forces impossible to hit while making our defenses useless. They're fighting us with weapons that shouldn't work but somehow do. Either they're incredibly lucky, or they're so far beyond us technologically that we can't even comprehend what they're doing." It was a logical conclusion, based on completely incorrect assumptions. But sometimes the wrong answer leads to the right result, and Admiral Thornblade was about to make the biggest mistake of his 3-century military career. He was about to take humanity seriously. Admiral Thornblade's moment of tactical enlightenment came just as Dr. Brightwick's quantum uncertainty defense grid decided to have what she would later describe as a bit of a fat hiccup. The machine, built from spare parts and desperate hope, was not designed for extended operation. More importantly, it was not designed to handle the kind of reality-bending stress that comes from making an entire space battle exist in 17 dimensions simultaneously. General?" Dr. Brightwick's voice crackled over the comm system, sounding slightly panicked. "We might have a small problem." General Boulder, who was watching his primitive shuttles somehow demolish an advanced alien fleet, wasn't particularly interested in problems at the moment. "Can it wait, Doctor? We're kind of in the middle of winning our first interstellar war." "Well, sir, the thing is, my quantum field generator is starting to make some very concerning noises. Also, I'm pretty sure I just saw my coffee mug exist in 2 places at once." "Is that bad?" "In general, yes. When everyday objects start violating basic physical laws, it usually means reality is about to have what we scientists call a major malfunction. Boulder paused his victory celebration. How, Major? Think of reality as a big soap bubble, General. I've been poking it with a very sharp stick for the last 20 minutes. Meanwhile, in space, Captain Ironside was discovering that being impossible to hit had some unexpected drawbacks. His navigation system had given up trying to figure out where he was and had started displaying poetry instead. His weapons targeting system was convinced that all enemy ships were actually the same ship viewed from different angles, and his life support system kept asking him philosophical questions about the nature of existence. "Kevin, you still out there?" he called over the radio. "I think so, Captain. But I'm not sure what out there means anymore. My position indicator says I'm currently located at purple relative to the sound of Tuesday. Just keep firing, Kevin. Whatever you're hitting, keep hitting it." The young pilot was actually doing remarkably well for someone whose spacecraft had apparently ceased to exist in any meaningful sense. Kevin had always been good at video games, and he was treating this whole situation like a particularly complex first-person shooter. The fact that physics had stopped working properly just made it more interesting. "Captain, I think I just destroyed 3 enemy ships by shooting at a point in space that doesn't exist," Kevin reported cheerfully. "Good work. Keep not existing at them." Admiral Thornblade, watching his fleet get systematically destroyed by opponents who weren't technically there, was reaching the only logical conclusion available to him. Humans weren't just technologically superior. They were operating on a completely different level of understanding. They had somehow mastered the art of combat through impossibility. "Commander Zix," he said, his voice tight with frustration, "I want a full analysis of human capabilities, immediately." "Sir, based on current observations, humans appear capable of existing and not existing simultaneously, violating targeting systems through applications of theoretical physics, and weaponizing paradox itself. And we thought they were primitive. In our defense, sir, their technology does appear to be held together with adhesive tape." This was true. Captain Ironside's shuttle was making increasingly alarming sounds, and he was pretty sure the duct tape holding Shuttle 2 together was the only thing preventing a catastrophic decompression. But somehow this jury-rigged approach was working better than centuries of advanced alien engineering. Down in her laboratory, Dr. Brightwick was frantically trying to keep her quantum field generator from tearing a hole in the universe. The machine was shaking like a paint mixer. Sparks were flying from every connection. And at least 3 components were now existing in colors that weren't technically part of the visible spectrum. "Just hold together for 10 more minutes," she pleaded with the device. "We're actually winning this thing." The machine responded by making a sound like a dying whale having an existential crisis. "I'll take that as a maybe," she muttered, grabbing a fire extinguisher as one of the probability matrices burst into flames that burned in several dimensions simultaneously. General Boulder, monitoring the battle from his command center, was beginning to suspect that their victory might be slightly less intentional than he'd been claiming. The alien fleet was definitely retreating, but their own forces were also rapidly ceasing to exist in any conventional sense. "Sir," Colonel Peterson reported, "Captain Ironside is requesting permission to return to base before his shuttle forgets how to be a solid object." "Granted. What's our status on the alien fleet?" "They appear to be withdrawing to a safe distance. Approximately half their ships have been destroyed or damaged." Boulder allowed himself a moment of genuine pride. They'd actually done it. 3 shuttles and a physicist with a reality-breaking machine had somehow defeated the most powerful military force in the galaxy. Of course, they'd also possibly broken physics in the process, but you couldn't have everything. Admiral Thornblade, retreating to what he hoped was a safe distance from Earth's impossible defenders, was trying to salvage some dignity from the situation. "The Commander, send a message to Confederation Command. Tell them we've encountered a species of unprecedented technological capability. Request reinforcements and hazard pay." "What about the invasion, sir?" Thornblade looked at his tactical display, where Earth sat innocently in its orbit, surrounded by the wreckage of his supposedly invincible fleet. "The invasion is postponed indefinitely, possibly permanently. I'm not attacking that planet again until we figure out how they're doing what they're doing." Should we attempt to communicate with them, sir? Perhaps negotiate a truce? 6. They just destroyed half my fleet with 3 shuttles that may or may not actually exist. I'm not negotiating with them. I'm going to find the furthest possible corner of the galaxy and hide there until this whole situation makes sense. But Admiral Thornblade had made a crucial error. He was thinking like a rational military commander, assuming that Earth's impossible victory was the result of careful planning and superior technology. He couldn't conceive of the truth that humanity had just stumbled backwards into the galaxy's most improbable military victory through a combination of blind luck, questionable science, and the kind of stubborn refusal to accept reality that had characterized human history since the species learned to walk upright. As the Confederation fleet limped away from Earth, Dr. Brightwick finally managed to shut down her quantum field generator before it turned the solar system inside out. The machine wheezed to a stop with a sound like reality sighing in relief. Well, she said to herself, surveying the smoking ruins of her laboratory. That worked better than expected. Captain Ironside managed to land his shuttle, despite the fact that it had temporarily forgotten how to interact with gravity. As he climbed out of the cockpit, he found himself wondering if what had just happened was real, or if he was having some kind of elaborate hallucination. Kevin, he called to the young pilot, who was standing next to his own shuttle looking dazed. Did we just win? I think so, Captain. Though I'm not entirely sure what we won, or how, or whether it actually happened. General Boulder emerged from his command bunker to find a world that looked exactly the same as it had that morning, except for the part where humanity had apparently become the galaxy's most feared military power. Well, he said to Colonel Peterson, I guess we should probably tell everyone what just happened. What did just happen, sir? Boulder considered the question carefully. I have absolutely no idea, Colonel. But whatever it was, let's make sure we can do it again. What none of them realized was that their accidental victory had just sent shockwaves throughout the Galactic Confederation. Within hours, every military commander in the galaxy would be receiving reports of Earth's impossible defensive capabilities. Within days, the entire political structure of galactic civilization would begin to shift as species realized that the humans might be the key to overthrowing their oppressors. And within weeks, humanity would find itself accidentally leading the galaxy's first successful rebellion in 3 centuries, despite having no idea what they were rebelling against or how to lead anything more complex than a 3-shuttle space force. But that's getting ahead of the story. 3 days after Earth's glorious victory, General Boulder was discovering that saving humanity came with a surprising amount of paperwork. His desk was buried under reports from every intelligence agency on the planet, all trying to figure out what the hell had actually happened, and whether they could do it again. Sir, Colonel Peterson entered with yet another stack of files. We're getting some interesting chatter from our deep space monitoring stations. More aliens? Yes, but different aliens. Apparently, word of our tactical success has spread throughout the galaxy. Boulder looked up from a report titled Preliminary Analysis of Impossible Physics in Modern Warfare. What kind of chatter? Well, sir, it seems that the Galactic Confederation wasn't universally beloved. We're receiving what appear to be requests for assistance from dozens of species. Assistance with what? Overthrowing their oppressors, sir. They seem to think we're some kind of military geniuses. Boulder laughed, a sound with no humor in it whatsoever. Peterson, 3 days ago I thought our greatest strategic challenge was figuring out how to surrender gracefully. Now apparently half the galaxy wants us to lead their revolution. Meanwhile, Dr. Brightwick was in her rebuilt laboratory, trying to figure out how to intentionally recreate what she'd accidentally accomplished. The problem was, she wasn't entirely sure what she'd done in the first place. Her notes from that day consisted mainly of coffee stains and desperate scribbles that made no sense in retrospect. Let's see, she muttered, flipping through pages of illegible handwriting. Quantum uncertainty plus dimensional flux equals, apparently, military superiority. But how do I replicate something that only worked because I didn't understand it? The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Kevin, the intern pilot who'd somehow become Earth's second greatest space ace, was reviewing his mission recordings when he noticed something peculiar. Dr. Brightwick, he said, barging into her laboratory with the enthusiasm of youth. I think I figured out why we won. Oh, good. Because I've been trying to solve that puzzle for 3 days. Kevin pulled up his flight recorder data on his tablet. Look at this. During the battle, my navigation system kept glitching, right? But I just realized something. Every time it glitched, every time it told me I was in an impossible location, that's exactly when my weapons hit their targets. Brightwick studied the data, her excitement growing. Kevin, you beautiful genius. Do you realize what this means? That my shuttle is broken? No, well, yes, but more importantly, it means the quantum uncertainty field wasn't just making us hard to hit. It was making reality negotiable. Every time you acted like the impossible was possible, the universe just went along with it. This was, in fact, exactly what had happened. Dr. Brightwick's machine hadn't just created a field of quantum uncertainty. It had created a zone where confidence and belief could temporarily override physical laws. The more convinced someone was that something should work, the more likely it was to actually work. Unfortunately for the galaxy, humans had an extraordinary talent for being irrationally confident about things they didn't understand. Doctor, Kevin said slowly, are you telling me that we won because we were too stupid to know we should lose? In the most beautiful, elegant, scientifically impossible way imaginable. While Earth was slowly figuring out the secret of their victory, Admiral Thornblade was dealing with a rapidly deteriorating situation. The news of his defeat had spread throughout Confederation space, and subject species everywhere were beginning to ask uncomfortable questions about invincibility. Sir, Commander Zix reported, we're receiving reports of uprisings in the Vega system. The locals are demanding independence and claiming they have human military advisors. Do they actually have human military advisors? Unknown, sir. But they're fighting with tactics that make no tactical sense whatsoever, and they're winning. Thornblade studied the reports flowing in from across his empire. Everywhere, species that had been crushed under Confederation rule for centuries were suddenly developing impossible military capabilities. More disturbing, they all seemed to be copying human strategies that shouldn't work but somehow did. Commander, I think we have a bigger problem than we realized. Sir, we didn't just lose a battle to the humans, we showed the entire galaxy that we could be beaten. And apparently the secret to beating us is to stop thinking like rational military strategists. This was precisely what was happening. Across dozens of worlds, rebellion leaders were studying the fragmentary reports of Earth's victory and drawing all the wrong conclusions. They assumed that human tactics were based on some advanced understanding of warfare, not realizing that the tactics worked specifically because they were completely insane. The result was a galaxy-wide outbreak of military chaos. Species that had never won a significant battle in their history were suddenly routing Confederation forces using strategies that violated every principle of sound military doctrine. On the planet Zarian, rabbit-like creatures called the Fluffari defeated an entire Confederation garrison by launching an attack with weapons that were obviously fake, confident that their obvious fakeness would somehow make them more effective. It worked. It worked. In the Centauri system, the aquatic Splishy attempted to conduct space battles by pretending their ships were actually submarines. Their underwater tactics in the vacuum of space somehow resulted in them successfully torpedo running beneath Confederation battle cruisers and delivering devastating attacks to their hulls. The Confederation fleet, trained in proper three-dimensional space combat, had no idea how to respond to enemies who insisted on fighting in only 2 dimensions while somehow still winning. The most spectacular example came from the crystalline Charadians, who decided that the secret to human success must be their use of primitive projectile weapons. Having misunderstood the reports entirely, they began hurling actual rocks at Confederation starships. The rocks, thrown with complete confidence in their effectiveness, somehow began moving at near light speed and punching through advanced energy shields like they were tissue paper. "This is impossible," Admiral Thornblade muttered, reviewing the latest disaster reports. "Rocks. They're defeating our fleet with rocks." "Sir," Commander Zix said carefully, "our xenopsychology department has a theory. I'm desperate enough to hear it. They believe the humans may have accidentally discovered something fundamental about the nature of reality itself, something about belief and confidence affecting physical outcomes. Thornblade stared at his aide. Are you suggesting that thinking something will work makes it work? Only if you really, truly believe it will work, sir. And apparently the key is not understanding why it shouldn't work in the first place. Back on Earth, Dr. Brightwick was coming to the same conclusion through more scientific methods. Her experiments with the quantum uncertainty field had revealed something extraordinary. Consciousness itself seemed to play a role in determining physical outcomes, but only when that consciousness was supremely confident and completely ignorant of the reasons why something was impossible. It's like the universe has a sense of humor, she explained to General Boulder during their daily briefing. The more rationally you approach a problem, the more bound you are by physical laws. But if you approach it with complete, unshakable confidence and a total lack of understanding of why it shouldn't work, reality becomes flexible. Doctor, are you telling me that ignorance is literally power? In the most terrifying way possible, yes. This discovery was simultaneously the best and worst news humanity had ever received. On one hand, they had accidentally become the most powerful military force in known space. On the other hand, their power was entirely dependent on remaining ignorant of how it worked. 6 months later, President Martinez found herself in the surreal position of being the de facto leader of what historians would later call the most reluctant empire in galactic history. Her Oval Office had been expanded twice to accommodate ambassadors from 47 different species, all of whom insisted on personally thanking humanity for liberating them from the Confederation. Madam President, Ambassador Flixnar of the Tentacled Collective was saying, his translator making his gratitude sound oddly mechanical. Our people have composed 17 epic songs about your glorious military genius. Would you like to hear them? That's very kind, Martinez replied diplomatically, but I'm sure they're quite long. Only 47 hours each. Meanwhile, General Boulder was discovering that commanding a galactic rebellion was significantly more complicated than defending a single planet. His headquarters had become a bizarre mix of human military efficiency and alien chaos, with species from across the galaxy arriving daily to receive human military training. The problem was, nobody could figure out how to actually teach the human method of warfare, since it seemed to require not understanding what you were doing. Attempts to create a curriculum kept failing, because the moment someone explained why a tactic worked, it stopped working. Colonel Peterson had been promoted to Director of Impossible Military Education, a position that existed nowhere in any military manual. His job was essentially to teach aliens how to be confidently wrong about everything. Okay, listen up, he announced to a classroom full of diverse alien species. Today we're learning about the tactical advantage of complete confusion. Now, the key to this is to forget everything you think you know about physics, logic, and basic survival instincts. A crystalline charadian raised what might have been a hand. But sir, if we forget everything we know, how will we remember what you're teaching us? That's the beauty of it. You're not supposed to remember. You're supposed to act on pure instinct and inexplicable confidence. The charadian's crystal structure flickered in what Peterson had learned was their equivalent of deep confusion. So we should be confident about not understanding. Exactly. You're getting it. But if I understand that I should not understand, don't I understand too much? Peterson felt a headache coming on. Look, just wing it. That's the human secret. We wing everything. Dr. Brightwick, meanwhile, had been trying to understand the quantum uncertainty field well enough to potentially turn it off, which was proving impossible for the same reason it was impossible to teach. Every time she got close to a complete understanding of how it worked, it stopped working. She had, however, made one disturbing discovery. The field was growing. General, she reported during their weekly briefing, I have good news and bad news. Give me the bad news first. The quantum uncertainty field that's been giving us our military advantage, it's expanding. It's now encompassing roughly 3 solar systems and growing at an accelerating rate. Boulder stared at her. And the good news? Well, Every species in those systems is now developing the same reality-bending capabilities we have. The Confederation is retreating from the entire sector. Doctor, how is that good news? It means we're not alone in this anymore. The responsibility is spreading. Indeed, the expanding field was creating what Dr. Brightwick privately called zones of narrative convenience, where the universe seemed to operate more on story logic than physical laws. Heroes won against impossible odds, last-minute plans worked perfectly, and the power of friendship could literally move mountains. The Galactic Confederation, faced with an ever-expanding region of space where their superior technology and rational military strategies were useless, did what any reasonable galactic empire would do. They built a wall. Admiral Thornblade, now relegated to Containment Operations Director, oversaw the construction of a massive barrier designed to prevent the human madness from spreading further. The barrier was a marvel of Confederation engineering, incorporating every known principle of physics to create an impenetrable boundary. It lasted exactly 3 days before a group of human teenagers, on a dare, convinced themselves they could throw a paper airplane through it. The airplane, propelled by nothing but adolescent confidence and complete disregard for the laws of physics, punched a hole straight through the barrier and kept going until it achieved orbital velocity around a distant star. Sir, Commander Zix reported with the weary tone of someone who had long since given up trying to understand anything. The barrier has been breached by origami. Admiral Thornblade looked at the report, then at his aide, then at the vast emptiness of space beyond his command ship's viewport. Zix, I'm starting to think the universe is personally offended by the concept of rational thought. Should we rebuild the barrier, sir? With what? At this point, I'm afraid to make any military decisions at all. What if confidence in our own competence starts affecting reality too? This was, unfortunately, exactly what was beginning to happen. The quantum uncertainty field continued to expand, and with it, the galaxy was slowly but surely becoming a place where believing in yourself was literally the most powerful force in the universe. Humanity, still largely unaware of the cosmic chaos they had unleashed, continued to muddle through with their characteristic combination of good intentions, poor planning, and inexplicable success. They had accidentally become the center of a galactic revolution, the founders of an empire they never wanted, and the inadvertent destroyers of rational thought as a governing principle of reality. And the most terrifying part, it was working.